fully a man and most fully himself. Such self-realization requires him to act on that desire for knowledge which as a man he naturally possesses. Aristotle's recipe for happiness may be thought severe or restricted, and he was surely optimistic in ascribing to the generality of mankind his own passionate desire for learning. But his recipe came from the heart. He counsels us to live our lives as he himself tried to live his own. One of Aristotle's ancient biographers remarks that he wrote a large number of books which I have thought it appropriate to list because of the man's excellence in every field. There follows a list of some 150 items, which, taken together and published in the modern style, would amount to perhaps 50 substantial volumes of print. And the list does not include all of Aristotle's writings. Indeed, it fails to mention two of the works, the Metaphysics and the Nicomachean Ethics, for which he is today most renowned. It is a vast output, yet it is more remarkable for its scope and variety than for its quantity. The catalogue of his titles includes On Justice, On the Poets, On Wealth, On the Soul, On Pleasure, On the Sciences, On Species and Genus, Deductions, Definitions, Lectures on Political Theory, in 8 books, The Art of Rhetoric, On the Pythagoreans, On Animals, in 9 books, Dissections, in 7 books, On Plants, On Motion, On Astronomy, Homeric Problems, in 6 books, On Magnets, Olympic Victors, Proverbs, On the River Nile. There are works on logic and on language, on the arts, on ethics and politics and law, on constitutional history and on intellectual history, on psychology and physiology, on natural history, zoology, biology, botany, on chemistry, astronomy, mechanics, mathematics, on the philosophy of science, and on the nature of motion and space and time, on metaphysics and the theory of knowledge. Choose a field of research, and Aristotle labored in it. Pick an area of human endeavor, and Aristotle discoursed upon it. Of all these writings, barely 1/5 has survived. But the surviving fraction contains samples of most of his studies, and although the major part of his life's work is lost, we may still form a rounded idea of his activities. Most of the surviving writings were perhaps never intended to be read, for it seems likely that the treatises which we possess were made up from Aristotle's lecture notes. The notes were made for his own use and not for public dissemination. They were no doubt tinkered with over a period of years. Moreover, although some of the treatises owe their structure to Aristotle himself, others were plainly put together by later editors. The Nicomachean Ethics is evidently not a unitary work. The Metaphysics is plainly a set of essays rather than a continuous treatise. In the light of this, it will hardly be a surprise to find that the style of Aristotle's works is often rugged. Plato's dialogues are finished literary artifacts, the subtleties of their thought matched by the tricks of their language. Aristotle's writings, for the most part, are terse. His arguments are concise. There are abrupt transitions, inelegant repetitions, obscure allusions. Paragraphs of continuous exposition are set among staccato jottings. The language is spare and sinewy. If the treatises are unpolished, that is in part because Aristotle had felt no need and no urge to take down the beeswax. But only in part, for Aristotle had reflected on the appropriate style for scientific writing, and he favored simplicity. In every form of instruction there is some small need to pay attention to language, for it makes a difference with regard to making things clear whether we speak in this or that way. But it does not make much of a difference. All these things are show and directed at the hearer, which is why no one teaches geometry in this way. Aristotle could write finely. His style was praised by ancient critics who read works of his which we cannot, and some parts of the surviving items are done with power and even with panache. But fine words butter no parsnips, and fine language yields no scientific profit. The reader who opens his Aristotle and expects to find a systematic disquisition on some philosophical subject, or an orderly textbook of scientific instruction, will be brought up short. Aristotle's treatises are not like that. But reading the treatises is not a dull slog. Aristotle has a vigor which is the more attractive the better it is known.